It turns out Josh Allen is Superman. He can do it all. He can even score 2 touchdowns on one play. We react to the best, worst, and most surprising fantasy performances from Week 13 on today's episode of Locked On Fantasy Football.
You are Locked On Fantasy, your daily NFL fantasy podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into the Locked On Fantasy Football Podcast. I'm one of your co-hosts, Michelle Magdziuk, and when I'm not doing this, I'm a researcher and fantasy analyst with NFL Network.
And I'm your other co-host, Vinnie Iyer. When I'm not doing this, I'm writing about NFL fantasy and betting for sportingnews.com. Hope everyone had a great Thanksgiving and all your teams came through over the long weekend as well.
One of my teams did not come through, and we're going to talk about that in just a second. But I want to remind everyone, today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Last night in the snow, Josh Allen has a monster game, right? But he got 2 touchdowns on one play to get him all the way to 28.4 fantasy points and 4-point passing touchdowns leagues, first among quarterbacks so far in the week. I lost my matchup because Josh Allen was given both a passing and a receiving touchdown on a single play. I am not happy. I don't understand it. And it was a rushing touchdown anyways. It was neither passing nor receiving. So I just don't understand, but whatever.
Yeah, it's the old extension of the play with the lateral or whatever. So it's confusing. I get it. And it's kind of frustrating because he didn't have a big night passing otherwise and really not a big night running. But in the snow, he just kind of took over the game. And so you have to give him that. And he's just a compiler. He's going to get it done. And now he's added a new dimension to what he can do, apparently. So he's just a guy that you look at on the other side. If it's Jalen Hurts, you also have that feeling. But there's a few more quarterbacks where you're starting to have that feeling now. If they're on the other side, you just dread when they're going to take the field because you know you're pretty much in trouble if that player is still looming for your opponent. And definitely Josh Allen is up there. I think Jalen Hurts, those two guys are expected, but a few guys that were unexpected doing that. Then James Cook also looked really good in that game. This Bills team is rolling. They'll get the Rams next, team that can give up a lot in terms of yardage and points. So I think the Bills are going to roll there. It's in Los Angeles. So we know there's going to be no snow for the Bills offense in week 14.
Yeah, I mean, it's James Cook and Josh Allen. That's pretty much this offense. No wide receiver or tight end really did much of anything last night. Knox had one longer catch, but that's about it. You can't really trust those guys, but Josh Allen, James Cook, absolutely amazing. Now, my Steelers, they went off this week against the Bengals. I mean, everybody goes off against the Bengals, but Russell Wilson puts up 414 passing yards. He has 3 passing touchdowns, scores 27 points this week, third among quarterbacks. Najee Harris has over 120 scrimmage yards. He gets a touchdown. Pat Freiermuth with that 68 yards and a touchdown. Woo. And George Pickens gets his touchdown as well with 74 yards. But they all just went off, and they get the Browns next week at home. I think you just keep playing them.
Yeah, I think they may have anticipated the Bengals were going to maybe score with them a little bit, so they kind of got aggressive, which was good to see. It's funny, no one's talking about how bad of an offense coordinator Arthur Smith is now, are they? Like he's got it going. Maybe just having a coach and a quarterback and kind of a functional team overall is going to provide that. And when you look at what he left behind at the Falcons, they're having some of the same issues they had with Arthur Smith there. So you're looking at the Steelers. I mean, he's done a great job. And just knowing the strengths of your team, it seems very simple, but he knows what Russell Wilson's strengths are. You get him to throw deep. He likes to throw downfield. He doesn't like to check down all that much. Get him to throw deep, and you saw that in the game. Like you were stretching the field all the way really till late in the fourth quarter when it was still a game. They were still throwing downfield here with Russell Wilson. So that was a good anticipation. That also opens up the running game, and Wilson plays well off play action and throw deep. So I think they're just locked in what they're going to do. And the Browns, look, throw that first game out in the weather in Cleveland on a Thursday night, short week. The Steelers are going to be more like the offense we saw against the Bengals. I'm not saying they're going to score as many points. They did also get a defensive touchdown. It's crazy that both teams had a defensive touchdown in the game and all that scoring. But when you look at it overall, I think the Steelers are in a groove. They kind of know what they're doing. And that's good. You know who it's going to be on this team. It's going to be the backs a little bit. You need a little bit more volume maybe from Jaylen Warren, but if you're in PPR, you're happy with him. You know it's going to go through Pickens, Freiermuth, occasionally some other receivers. Harris is going to be a big part where they do. And Wilson is tying it all together. And by the way, he's still available. I was looking at 65% of leagues. So if you need a quarterback, 6 teams on bye this week, he would be a really good streaming option, as well as Will Levis against the Jaguars.
Yeah, well, let's talk about that Titans game, because the Titans side disappointed, except if you had Nick Westbrook-Akine in your lineup, who just cannot stop scoring touchdowns. He has 8 receiving touchdowns since week 6, tied for the most in that span with Jamar Chase. Like, you had Westbrook-Akine, you were happy because you got 2 touchdowns. They get the Jags next week. That's awesome for him. But Will Levis, disappointed. Calvin Ridley disappointed. We'll get to that in our segment about bad performances. But the Washington side of that game, they killed it, right? Jayden Daniels goes off for 4 touchdowns, 27 fantasy points. Terry McLaurin has 2 receiving touchdowns. Brian Robinson Jr. had a nice long touchdown as well in there. They're looking fantastic again. Like, it was a couple down weeks from Jayden Daniels and 2 hard matchups against the Steelers and the Eagles. But then since then, he's woken back up. Unfortunately, they have a bye this week, but after that, it's the Saints. So I think the Commanders' offense is back.
Yeah, it's totally back, and what they were trying to do, and they were still able to run the ball deep into the game. It was a little bit different cast of characters with Austin Eckler out there. So when you look at it, I mean, Brian Robinson looked great. I mean, he set the tone with that 40-yard touchdown. The running game kind of gets everything flowing here. And Terry McLaurin, Jayden Daniels. Now, this is the combination I said to target in drafts, and I've had them on my team. So when they're working together, they're putting up all these points together. So I love it. Daniels has totally transformed McLaurin into the receiver he should be as a clear number 1, making big plays, scoring touchdowns. So I love it. And the Commanders, look, we all want more offenses to be this explosive. The Commanders used to be a frustrating source of any points, but now they're very reliable going forward. And again, they close the stretch really well in the fantasy season, but make sure you got some replacements here, because it could come as a shock that you've been riding the Commanders all year and now they're off in a critical time here in week 14.
Yeah, hopefully your playoffs don't start this week and you're trusting, you've been relying on them. That would stink. Hopefully you don't start till week 15. But 2 running backs that had fantastic performances this week. Bijan Robinson with 22.5 points in half PPR. And then Bucky Irving, who finishes as the running back 1 so far in the week with Monday Night Football still to go. I loved him this week against the Panthers. And he's been getting so much volume. He got 25 carries in the game yesterday. The last 3 weeks he's played, he's been the running back 7, running back 3, and running back 1. He gets the Raiders next week. I mean, let's go.
Yeah, I mean, you go from one terrible run defense to another. By the way, Saquon Barkley gets to run at that Panthers defense this week. So that could be another 200-yard game easily after the Rams performance. So that's part of the matchup. But Irving is definitely separated a little bit, where Rachaad White is kind of the backup role. They bring him in to relieve him a bit. But Irving's had such a special rookie season where they couldn't deny the touches. And Bijan Robinson, look, we can complain about the way they use Tyler Algier, but when their passing game is kind of stinking right now, I mean, Bijan has been the one thing that you can kind of count on. So, interesting matchup this week against Minnesota. But yeah, Bijan is in there every week, but now Bucky Irving actually might have pivoted to becoming a feature back for the Bucs.
Yeah, I mean, Bijan has been consistent right over the second half of the season. Only 1 bad game in there over the last 8 weeks. So Bijan's been great. Unlike, I feel like we always compare Bijan to Breece Hall, right? Breece Hall's not been so good. He'll be in our next talking points with the bad performances yet again. But one more guy I want to hit on for a great performance, because he also suffered a knee injury, so that kind of stinks. But Ladd McConkey, 9 receptions, 117 yards against the Falcons. He has been getting the targets. He's been on fire. He was the only good part of this Chargers offense yesterday. But we don't know what the severity of this knee is yet. So keep an eye on that. But McConkey's out there and healthy, you're playing him.
Yeah, and you're going to have to make a decision at some point if it comes down to a game time thing, because McConkey is playing in prime time with the Chargers against the Chiefs on Sunday night. So hopefully we'll have a little bit of clarity on his status. It would make it a little bit more difficult for them to go into Kansas City and win without their red-hot rookie receiver if he's not out there. But McConkey's been great. We said he could crush it in the slot. The Falcons are just terrible in the slot. So keep that in mind this week with Jordan Addison and the Vikings. That's probably going to be a good person to target in a lot of lineups this week. So just keep that in mind. They're just really bad at covering the slot right now. That is the best matchup to exploit. McConkey did that for sure. So we like it when things we see and the evidence is there and the player comes through. It makes it a lot easier to be a fantasy football analyst if that happens. So McConkey came through. I'm excited about that. Now I just want him to stay on the field because I think he could have a big finish and win some leagues here.
Yeah, we need him too for Justin Herbert. Herbert had a bad game. We're going to dig into Herbert's performance. And he, after a few bigger weeks, he's come back down to life. And McConkey had 117 of his 147 passing yards yesterday. So we have to talk about that. But let's quickly take a break.
I'm excited to say we have a new sponsor here on Locked On Fantasy Football just in time for the holidays. I can't be more excited to introduce this next product to you if you haven't heard about it. It's Ice Shaker and iceshaker.com. Ice Shakers are awesome because you can get them in team logos, a perfect gift for family and friends. All you have to do is use the promo code LOCKEDONNFL, and you'll get 25% off any Ice Shaker. What is it? It's a fun gift to have. We're all buying these cold cups that we want to keep things chill all throughout the holiday season. Well, the Gronkowski brothers have created this, and so it's fun right there. You know that. Ice Shakers have sold more than 1 million bottles. That's right. It's workout bottles that are going to stay cold for you, and that's great because everyone's making resolutions after Christmas and getting into the new year. So Ice Shakers are going to get you covered there. You can get kitchen-grade stainless steel bottles that won't absorb odor like plastic bottles do. So great stuff there. Third-party tested. You know you can count on the ice to be cold for 30-plus hours. Customizable, so you can put your logo on it or stick with one of your favorite major league teams, whether it's an NFL or another sport. The agitator is also a strainer inside, so make it very solid for tailgating cup to mix drinks as well. So it's such a versatile cup, such a great gift. Order your team branded bottles today at iceshaker.com and use the code LOCKEDONNFL for 25% off your order. Ice Shaker, show your support with your teams and the best branded workout cup on the market. It's a bottle. It's everything for you, only at Ice Shakers.
This episode is also sponsored by BetterHelp. As an adult, do you make time to learn new things as often as you'd like, or was that lost in childhood? I know a lot of us adults can really lose that curiosity as we get older and older, and just, life kind of overwhelms you and you have a lot of growing up tasks to do, right? Like, I understand that, but therapy can really help you reconnect with your sense of wonder because your back to school era can come at any age. I know I would not be here today working in fantasy football, doing this podcast, if it wasn't for doing online therapy and getting that curiosity back and getting that willingness to, jump into the things that I once loved as a teenager. So if you're if you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online. It's designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. All you have to do is fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist. And you don't have to stress because you can switch therapists anytime for no additional charge. Just visit betterhelp.com/lockdown today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockdown. Give online therapy a try and get on your way to your best self. All right, so we hit on Ladd McConkey, and he was the only one that did anyone for the Chargers. Gus Edwards in the starting role without J.K. Dobbins, 6 for 32. Vidal got some carries at 4 carries, 20 yards. Like nothing going on in the running game. Herbert only had 1 rushing yard as well. And then Herbert only has 147 passing yards. It's now been 2 straight weeks without a passing touchdown. He gets the Chiefs next week. Are you going back to him or are you kind of, cooling off on him?
Yeah, this is a game that I absolutely misread. I thought these teams were going to have to throw it up and down the field. I mean, Kirk Cousins had 4
interceptions.
Yeah, 0 TDs from either of these quarterbacks in a game like this where you have a lot of offensive talent on the field. I just didn't get it. I think both teams were just maybe losing it here. The Falcons weren't ready, even though they had a bye. It didn't make any sense. The Chargers seemed like they were out of their element playing on the East Coast. So I don't know. It was just two teams kind of sleepwalking through that game, some injuries, and just weird ineffectiveness all around, but could be also the defense kind of came through for both teams, especially for the Chargers. So again, Justin Herbert's going to have to do a lot better than that to beat the Chiefs this week. I know the Chiefs are kind of low scoring, but it's not the best matchup. I don't know if you'll feel comfortable with it. Kirk Cousins, you get the revenge game, but it's a revenge game against the Vikings defense. So I don't know how comfortable you can feel about either of these guys on the road. But yeah, especially after this performance, and if McConkey's not out there for Herbert, that's a concern. And Cousins, I mean, he didn't complete a pass to Kyle Pitts, got Derwin James in this game quite a bit. So I don't know. These offenses and passing games should be better. They have just too many weapons not to make that happen. I don't see, again, a get well game right away. It might take a couple weeks before we see these offenses get on track.
Yeah, I mean, it's just not working out for Kirk Cousins lately. And unless he's facing the Buccaneers, he's not putting up fantasy points. And I was maybe going to be interested in him in the revenge game at the Vikings, but you can't go into that after this type of performance. Yeah. Maybe he could have a big game, but we know the Vikings are very good at causing turnovers as well. So I don't want to risk that. You just don't have to, right? There's other better options out there. Now, Brock Purdy, we got to talk about this. We talked about Josh Allen on the other side of this game last night. Brock Purdy in this 49ers offense couldn't do anything in this weather. Jordan Mason looked fine on the ground, but, as he's not involved in the passing game, so it just ends up 13 for 78, and without getting a touchdown, it's pretty much pointless. And then Isaac Guerrero goes and steals the rushing touchdown from him. Christian McCaffrey gets a knee injury in the game, so he did nothing for you in this game either. And it looks like he might miss the rest of the season. So if you took him 101, this has been a disaster of a year for you. And Purdy's shoulder doesn't look right either. He's not throwing down the field. Maybe that was weather. Who knows? But his shoulder doesn't look right. Only has 94 passing yards. Here's next week. They are home, but I think you got to just stay away from this 49ers offense altogether. Besides George Kittle, who I know he failed miserably last night, but you could stick with him.
Well, whenever Trent Williams doesn't play, Brock Purdy, this offense tends to stink, and Trent Williams didn't play, but they also were without their left guard, Aaron Banks. They've been without Brandon Ayuk for a while. Debo Samuel, they might as well be without him because he's not doing anything. Juwan Jennings had a drop early in this game. Go figure. Of all the 49ers on offense, George Kittle is the healthiest. So you can never say that at this point. But, yeah, it doesn't look good for McCaffrey. Again, they lose that element of the passing game without McCaffrey. I wonder, Michelle, if they're going to think about shutting down Brock Purdy at some point, right?
They probably should.
If they're out of the playoff chase, which they are hanging on because that NFC West is just giving them hope. It's not all that great in that division. So that's why they might be thinking of maybe making a run, but they have so many injuries at this point. I don't see them having success, even if they're able to sneak into the playoffs. So,
no.
And they got to win the division. And there's no saying that they're going to do that for sure because the Seahawks are playing well. The Cardinals have played well. The Rams can always make a run here. So I don't even know. So if they shut him down, then you're pretty much looking at George Kittle as the only asset that you can go to consistently. And Jennings, I think, has a key chemistry with Purdy, so that would stink. And then Mason, again, the Bears matchup is a little bit favorable for that this week. It's at home at least. But again, the Bears defense, again, you can run on them, but it's really hard to really light them up unless you're running effectively on Chicago. So I don't know. I think you have to just stay away from Purdy altogether right now if Kittle's the only reliable weapon.
Yeah, until we can see he can actually throw down the field, because right now, again, maybe it was just due to the weather, but he wasn't trying to push it down the field at all yesterday. Now, the Jets, another just terrible offense, but Breece Hall has another bad game, 6 fantasy points, 12 carries for 60 yards, 5 yards per carry on the ground. So it's not like he was inefficient, but that's all the work he got. He had 0 receptions. He has now finished as running back 31, 29, 22, and 38 in 4 of his last 5 weeks played. And then Garrett Wilson gets another 10 targets, but only 5 receptions for 41 yards for 6.6 fantasy points. He has now finished as the wide receiver 42, 66, and 49 over the Jets' last 3 games. What do you do with these two guys, Vinny?
It seemed like Aaron Rodgers was doing something in particular in the game, and he was like making sure his buddy Devontae Adams was getting the ball, right? It seemed like he only cared about Devontae Adams putting up numbers or doing anything in his game. And then they had the lead, and you think they were playing inspired. They were fired up early, and then all of a sudden the Seahawks get a defensive touchdown. Then the game flips on that play as the Jets are driving. And then it seemed like they checked out a little bit. And why wouldn't you check out? This has been a disastrous season. You've lost your coach, your offense coordinator was demoted, your general manager got fired. I mean, there's just nothing going on here that's positive for the Jets. And they get the Dolphins this week, a tough pass defense matchup. But I'm really disappointed with the pivot to Todd Downing because I thought Breece Hall would be a big part. Those touches are not acceptable for a player of Breece Hall's caliber. I know he fumbled in the game and that may have contributed, but this is ridiculous. Wasting guys like Hall, Wilson, and Adams. So I don't know. I can't feel great about playing them. I think you have to keep playing Hall and Wilson because where else are you going to go? You know they're going to get some volume and targets. You just have to hope for the best. But man, I don't know what Aaron Rodgers is doing. It's almost like he's intentionally sabotaging these guys to make him and Adams look good, which is really bad.
Yeah, I mean the Jets are just like almost unwatchable. It's a ugly team and offense, but yeah, I mean, I guess you're gonna keep playing Breece Hall and Garrett Wilson, but I mean,
It
I don't think
stinks.
you
You're
need
stuck
to
with
keep.
them.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
don't think necessarily you need to keep playing Garrett Wilson. I know he's getting
Yeah.
the 10 targets. Like Breece Hall, I doubt you have good enough running backs to bench him. Like if you have Bucky Irving, then sure,
Yeah.
I play Irving over Hall, but likely you don't have better options. Now, same thing with Kenneth Walker. He has a really bad game this week. Only 5.6 fantasy points. Running back 39 on the week so far. Prior to that, he was running back 19, 15, 16. I think that's what we have to accept from him. He doesn't have a super high ceiling in most weeks. He does have that floor, though, where he can give you this big stinker. You need to kind of get those targets from him, or you need him to get into the end zone. He is what he is, right? It's not a super exciting play. It's more like a James Conner type of play.
Yeah.
But he's a fine running back too in most weeks. And I think I'm willing to still plug him in after the stinker as well.
Yeah, we just had to be careful. Do they like the way Zach Charbonnet ran? I mean, he got the touchdown late in the game
Yeah.
to put the game away here. So I'm not sure, like, they're totally sold on Kenneth Walker as the lead back. I mean, he was still getting touches all the way in, but I think they kind of see it as Charbonnet and Walker can be in more of a split here. But again, most situations are like this in the NFL. Charbonnet happened to get the touchdown. They've been using Walker a lot to score touchdowns, and that's your best ticket for him to finish really high in a given week, well beyond an RB2. But yeah, you're just going to have to live with it. I think the matchup against the Cardinals is better this week. You want it to be a close game. They just could not get going. The Jets somehow stopped the run. They were a lot worse against the pass and downfield in the game, which we didn't expect either. So again, Walker will be fine. Again, you're probably stuck with him as an RB2 unless you get any indication that Charbonnet is going to make it more of an even split here.
One last guy I want to hit on for his bad performance is Tank Dell. He had a great matchup against the Jaguars, only came down with one reception, 23 yards. I mean, CJ Stroud also had a very disappointing performance. Nico Collins was great, as always. The Texans get a bye. Hopefully they can figure out what's wrong with their offense during this bye. But for Tank Dell in particular, they get the Dolphins, the Chiefs, and the Ravens the next 3 weeks. Like Tank Dell, if you took him, it was a wasted draft pick, kind of. He has given you very little. Had a couple good games, but like I'm not going to trust him in my fantasy playoffs after their bye. So if you want to drop him, I'm fine with that.
Yeah, this offense, I just don't get it. I mean, Stroud was okay, but he wasn't what we were looking for when you're playing the Jaguars defense here. And I mean, Mac Jones seemed to be coming more to life with what was going on the other side against the Texans defense. And we did like Trevor Lawrence, by the way. Unfortunately, he had that bad hit, but we saw why, right? If Parker Washington and some of these guys, Brian Thomas Jr., were doing some damage late in the game, it could have been a different outcome if Lawrence had been out there. Unfortunately, he takes the nasty hit from Al-Shaair there. So it's a really unfortunate situation. And again, Tank Dell on the other side, again, he's never really gotten going. Maybe the injury effects, maybe the offseason stuff, it's kind of put him behind schedule and kind of led to the sophomore slump. So it's really disappointing because he was so good when he was on the field last year, and really disappointing. Like Calvin Ridley, man, I don't know what you do there on Titans. I mean, he just is taking a back seat to Nick Westbrook-Ikine. So some of these things, best laid plans, the matchups, the situations all look good, but then the player has to take advantage of it. I don't think you've seen it either case with Ridley or Dell.
Yeah, I'm not so worried about Calvin Ridley. He does get to face the Jaguars next
Yeah.
week. I think he'll have a good game. He's been very solid. He's been getting the
Yeah.
targets. Just a down week against Commanders that happens sometimes. So I'll be going right back to Calvin Ridley, but not so much Tank Dell. We are going to finish up today's episode with just giving you a little waiver wire look ahead, talk through some injuries, who's expected to be out moving forward, who we're waiting on to hear about. But we'll get into all that after we take another quick break.
This episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, America's #1 sportsbook, and it's good time to tackle the NFL action here. We're past Thanksgiving. We're in the home stretch. It's December. It's a good time to go out there and get in on the action of FanDuel because right now new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of a game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your live bets. It's all good fun there at FanDuel.com. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You get started again with $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet comes through. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL.
This episode is also brought to you by the Game Time app. Buying tickets to your favorite event shouldn't be stressful. Game Time is the fast and easy way to buy tickets for all the sports, music, comedy, and theater near you. With killer deals on last-minute tickets and their best price guarantee, you can stop stressing over the tickets and start getting hyped for the fun you'll have. It's the fastest-growing ticketing app in the country for a reason. You get a panorama view of your seat before you buy, so you know exactly what to expect when you arrive. You can buy tickets in a matter of seconds, 2 taps, and you're set. And they have the best ticket coverage in the business in case anything goes wrong. They have event cancellation protection, 24-hour return guarantee, and even job loss assurance. You get to take the worries and the guessing work out of buying tickets with Game Time. All you have to do is download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply. Again, that's code LOCKEDONNFL, LOCKON NFL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game time. So we mentioned some serious injuries. Well, at least one so far. Christian McCaffrey, knee, expected to be out for the rest of the season. I don't really know why he'd come back. Maybe if they make a run, right? But expect to be out the rest of the season. Lad McConkey, knee, we're still waiting to hear. Trevor Lawrence, concussion, and it looked like a nasty one. I would not expect him to be back this week. Taysom Hill, knee, expected to be out the rest of the season. And then Dallas Goedert also came up with a knee injury as well. Those Eagles players, those 3 guys could not stay healthy. We're waiting to see how serious that is for Goddard and when he'll be back. But let's look ahead at the waiver wire. I think first off, people are going to want to know who to play instead of Christian McCaffrey. Like Jordan Mason may be out there. He maybe got dropped. Isaac Guerendo's definitely out there. Are you picking up either of those 2 guys? Obviously, you pick up Mason, but even Mason, when he was getting the work with this team healthier, with Brock Purdy healthy, like it still wasn't doing much of anything.
Yeah, this could be a different situation, right? When Christian McCaffrey was not available early in the season, there were still high hopes of the 49ers and making a run and staying afloat and being a good overall team until McCaffrey could return. Now we know the evidence is a little bit different. They're losing, they're struggling. What would that say? Maybe they want a little bit of spark from Guerendo. Keep in mind, he was the fastest running back of the combine. So he can give them a little extra juice that Mason cannot. He's a pretty good scoring back. We saw that as well. Seen it previous games before Buffalo. And he just is a talent that they need to watch. And another reason is, you don't know, McCaffrey, he's getting a little bit older. He's had a lot of work over the years with the Panthers and 49ers. This is yet another setback for him. So you kind of have to look a little bit about what's beyond. I think Jordan Mason is an okay backup, but he's not a guy that you want to put out for some major carries consistently, right? He's just not that special. Like he's going to run and get the yards, but when you don't have your offensive line intact and have some issues, he's not going to be as explosive or give you those plays. So I think they're going to look at Guerendo a little bit more. Again, it's probably going to be ugly because you'll see a split between these guys. Yeah. I think both could have success against the Bears, who are bad run defense this week. So, again, Guerendo's more widely available, but Jordan Mason also available in more than half the league. So if you're hurting a running back, make sure you pick up one of these guys.
I'll say after the Panthers have been making games close, right? They've been in games. Bryce Young looks a little bit better. He has a nice fantasy game this week with 298 passing yards, a touchdown, a passing touchdown and a rushing touchdown. Adam Thielen has a great game with 8 receptions, 99 yards, and a touchdown. Tommy Tremble comes on for JT Sanders, who's injured and has 5 receptions for 77 yards. Xavier Legette was okay, 4 receptions, 53 yards. That kind of just seems like what he's going to have every single week for him. I know some people might think, okay, if I'm struggling at quarterback, maybe Bryce Young is an option, right? He's been better. He has to play at the Eagles this week. Like, I'm not picking him up. If I'm picking someone up to play in replace of, let's say, CJ Stroud or Trevor Lawrence, if you had him, or Brock Purdy, who's been struggling, or Kirk Cousins or something like that, I'd go with Will Levis, who's going to be playing the Jaguars at home this week. Like, I'd rather go with that matchup with Will Levis than Bryce Young.
Yeah, and I mentioned earlier that Russell Wilson is still available in more than 60% of leagues. So if you can get him, that's good.
Yep.
Will Levis, I think, is available in 88% of leagues. And I have one more name I'm going to throw out for you is Aiden O'Connell. He played really well last week, gets the Buccaneers. That's the best matchup. That's the matchup that we just saw Bryce Young do well in. So sometimes you chase the matchup more than the player. I get it. Bryce Young played well against the Chiefs, and in this matchup, they were both at home, go to Philadelphia on the road in December. They're big underdogs in that game. The point total is not very high. So, and Adam Thielen, good night. He's going to face a much younger, faster kid there in Cooper DeJean in the slot. So it's probably good night for all these guys. The Eagles have actually been pretty good against the tight end with Zach Bond and their safeties as well. So all the stuff you saw that worked against the Buccaneers probably will not work against the Eagles defense. So keep that in mind. So go chase the matchup more so than the player if you're going to stream quarterbacks or need some backup help this week. And I do want to mention also Jordan Mason is a reminder. Any of these backs can go down, even Saquon Barkley. Go get Kenneth Gainwells, the Blake Corums. We saw him get a lot of work as well. Go get the backups while you can before someone else nabs them and you're stuck scrambling on the waiver wire not being able to get them.
And one more guy to talk about here, Parker Washington for the Jaguars puts up 6 receptions, 103 yards, and a touchdown on 12 targets. I think that 12 targets is really what sticks out to me. 21.3 fantasy points. He gets a nice matchup against the Titans next week. Is this a guy you're picking up? You consider playing him? I think he's a worthy option as a flex. You have to be a bit desperate. It has to be a deeper league, but and it looks like it's going to be Mac Jones, but he did it with Mac Jones in this game. So
yeah, it's just hard because we thought he was going to be more involved earlier in the Christian Kirk role, and that didn't happen. Maybe needed another receiver to go down, Gabe Davis as well, to make him get usage. And Evan Ingram is kind of, I don't know what's going on here. So when you look at that, I mean, like someone has to fill the void if they're going to throw for high volume. This is an interesting game for sure this week. And Mac Jones has chemistry with Parker Washington. Maybe that was it, right? We've seen the backups have chemistry with the backups a little bit more. Maybe he didn't have it with Lawrence, and maybe that's the difference here. So something to watch there for sure. I mean, you can't ignore that volume for anybody, right? And he's a guy that they're going to have to probably throw a lot in that game. The Titans offense is playing really well. So I do think Parker Washington, if you're desperate in a deeper league, you can go there. I would much prefer to go after him than chase Adam Thielen's points against the Buccaneers this week.
I'm with you there as well. For sure. I just for this week, I think Adam Thielen for the rest of the season, if you need a guy to be able to plug in, I would trust him more. Parker Washington for this week, I would much prefer him against the Titans than Adam Thielen against the Eagles. That is it for today's episode. I want to thank you all for making Locked On Fantasy Football your first listen every day. Everydayers, please hit that subscribe button on YouTube. Give us a like on whatever app you're listening to us. We'll be back tomorrow to dig in way more into the waiver wire. We'll talk to you then. Bye, y'all.